Hi guys, it's Chris from Microsoft again, welcoming you to another exciting episode of Let's Tech. Today we're going to be talking a little bit of Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services, formerly known as ADAM. I haven't done these in a while, and I've never done one on 2012, so I thought it'd be kind of neat to fiddle and fuddle my way through. If you haven't messed with ADAM or Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services, you might be thinking to yourself, well, oh, and by the way, first off, we must have this installed in order to actually do anything with it, obviously, so I thought I'd kick that off. You might be thinking, well, why in the world would I need an Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services install in my environment? Well, honestly, I've worked mostly in the commercial space, and I haven't found a whole lot of people who needed it except for like one-off specialty applications or something specific that needed it. Moving into a different part of the world, doing a little bit of the public sector stuff, and they've actually got several things they do with this. I'm really starting to see a lot of folks finding some value here, so you may at some point in the future find a need for this. Let me just kind of back out just for a second, and let's talk about Active Directory in general. When we're talking about AD, Active Directory is multi-master database. The use of the word database is somewhat controversial in Active Directory. Active Directory really is a storage engine first, more than anything else. Yes, it is a database. It's a JetBlue database, but it is a multi-master database. Think of this. What would be the value to you of having a database where you could install it and have it scale out to thousands of instances? You could have it exist across a whole host of different servers across the world, and every one of those database servers had a writable copy of the partitions in the database. That's what Active Directory does. It allows you to have multi-master capabilities because of the conflict resolution that it has. It has versioning on all attributes for the most part, nearly all. And it has what we call loose replication consistency, which means you would never necessarily have an exact copy of the database in all locations at all times, but with the conflict resolution, loose replication consistency does eventually bring to convergence. In other words, all the database copies will look the same eventually, just allowing for your replication interval to get there. So that's great for Active Directory, but there's other uses you could have for this, and there's two ways to extend the coolness of Active Directory's multi-master database into other applications that you could use it for. One of them would be to take an existing AD database and just throw an application partition in there for your own use. You can throw that partition out, do anything you want to with it, store all kinds of data, and have it replicate across your environment. It would replicate only to the Active Directory domain controllers that you enroll it on, so it doesn't have to hit every DC in your environment. It would only be the ones that need that application, and they will figure out site type data. So using Active Directory gives you the benefit, obviously, of having site-based access, because all clients in your environment already know how to go and find the nearest domain controller. Assuming you have your sites and subnets and sites and services all programmed up with the right site and linking technology, it'll also follow to the nearest domain controller, even in failure. So by throwing stuff out in an application partition, that would accomplish that task, but some people don't want the overhead of having the domain controllers, or maybe they want to separate this off of a domain controller. Okay, so LDS has finished. So the benefit here would be to take this off of a DC and even maybe put it on a client. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but you can put it on a member server, have it run an LDS instance, and then it's not actually messing with your DCs. Okay, so the first thing you have to do after you have installed the feature, and well, it's actually a role, is you need to run this wizard. You'll notice it did not require us to reboot this member server. This is MS1. This is the Contoso domain. If you guys watch a lot of my videos, then you've seen me work around with this Contoso domain quite a bit. So this is Contoso MS1. It is not a DC. It's just a member server. And Contoso DC is the domain controller in this instance. So you can see that after installing the feature, it's already giving me this. This is kind of cool. Run the Active Directory LDS setup wizard, which is something in R2 that you would also run. So there's not a change there. It's just a nice handy link to it. So I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. Looks like this is pretty much the same wizard from before. So for those of you who have done this in a lab before, this should not be anything new. So we don't have any existing instances yet. So what we're doing in this case is we're just going to start a new instance of Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services. We're not going to join this to an existing, but you can see how easily it would be to do that, right? So we need to give it a name and a description. The instance name will be something that as you can see the description here, type a name for this instance. This name should reflect the use for which the instance is intended. Why? Well, because you want to identify it so that when other people see the LDS instance, they know this is for application number 1. Right? So anybody who owns the application number 1 application would be that this would be what they're using it for. So maybe it's even a something that's going to be like DMZ app 1, right? And so you bought DMZ app 1 from DMZ app 1 service provider, and so we need to know what that is. So we're going to give it nice descriptive. The default Ldap port number is 389. And since I'm not running this on domain controller, it's going to let me run that on here. 636 is the secure Ldap port, so I'm just going to leave those alone because I'm not installing this side by side on a DC with an Active Directory instance. So it's asking, do we actually want to create an application partition or not right now? So it it certainly can be done later, but we're going to go ahead and do it now. And I'm going to go with the TechNet guide, the way they do that. So we're going to do that. O equals Microsoft and C equals US. So you can obviously move around where you're going to install these. Windows \NTDS is where you would find your Active Directory instance. You don't want to put it sitting next to an AD instance. The default here is to put it in Program Files under Atom. Notice the legacy name of Atom Active Directory Application Mode is still here, so I'm going to take the defaults for that. Then it needs to know about a service account. This is really kind of depending on what you're going to do with this thing. For demonstration purposes, the network service account is going to work just fine for us, but depending on what your application does, you may need to use a service account. Just remember, if you're going to have a specific account that you're going to do with this, make sure they have this run under that same account on all the machines that are going to host this LDS instance. Alright, so it's saying assign the following group or of users administration permissions. Obviously I need to have admin permissions to this instance, as I'm going to be obviously the one managing it, since I'm the one who's going to be creating it. So that's kind of a no-brainer. Alright, so here's where we get a lot of people starting to get confused. They're not really sure what to do with this. Now, when you talk about what's in a database, any database, you have fields where you can store data. And with Active Directory, all of those are defined, all the fields are defined in the schema. And the metadata, or data that describes data, that describes those fields or attributes, are all defined as well inside of the schema. So what you can do to modify the schema is actually bring in LDIF type files. Ldap files will modify the structure of the database. You can always add to a database in Active Directory. You can't remove, although you can retire things. You can't remove or rename things that are in there. But you can bring in by importing LDF files. LDIFDE is the tool you would use for that, but this is giving you a list of some very common structures, if you will, that you can go ahead and get imported into your database file. So this is very convenient that those put in there. So just to give you kind of a quick little list of what we've got, there's the MS inet org person that is going to contain the definition of the Ldap object class for an INET org person. If you're going to have users in this instance, then you need to have this so that you have a structure for your users that you're familiar with. MS-user, that's the Microsoft kind of extension to the user class, contains the user and related class object definitions. And we're going to need the user proxy, and we're going to need the MS AD LDS display specifiers. So what that is, it's an LDIF file for snap-in operation. So if you're planning to connect your AD LDS instance and then manage it through AD sites and services, this is how you can get that to happen. We're going to do that in this demo. Without this, you wouldn't be able to open that with that tool. So we'll go ahead and we'll throw these in there. That should be enough to get us where we need to go for a nice little demo. Alright, so it's giving us kind of a confirm your selections. Are you sure about all the little things you picked? And we'll click next, and it's going to go ahead and start getting this done. It does not take too terribly long to get through this step, but I'll pause it until it does finish here, and that way you're not watching the little green line incessantly. I will unpause for a moment. You can see that it just created the schema and then started the LDS service. So it basically imported those. You may have seen it very briefly as the thing unpaused. Alright, so now it's importing LDF into the partition that got created. I should mention that it's completely possible to do an unintended install of LDS. Don't know when you would need to do a whole bunch of these. Maybe you do that, but if you were somebody who was actually creating some service or program and you decided you want to use Active Directory, AD LDS as your database for whatever configuration you're going to be saving, or whatever you need to save in a database, and you want that to be automated for the environment, you could create a text file that would allow you to do that. There's a great article on TechNet that'll tell you how you can go about doing that. It tells you about every value that you would put into that text file. So all of this can be done automatically without a wizard. Alright, there we go. It's done. Okay, so it's finished with its part. So we'll go ahead and do this, we'll close that, and so we have the role on there. We have created an instance, so what do we do next? Well, it exists, it's sitting out there, we need to come and take a look at it. The best tool for looking at that sort of thing would be ADSI Edit. Now I want to show these kind of side by side and make sure everybody gets kind of the idea between the difference between a standard Active Directory and LDS here. So first I'm going to actually connect to just the default naming contact. Actually I'm going to config partition, connect to my DC, Contoso DC1. Alright, so inside the configuration partition we're going to find a couple of very interesting things that I always like to point out anytime I'm in ADSI Edit. Under config, this partitions container, very important. These are cross-reference objects. These don't really lean to anywhere. They are telling you about the partitions that exist inside the Active Directory database. Right? You can look at properties of them here. Like for instance, I just right-clicked on the schema properties, and we can kind of look at the properties for the schema. But that's a property for the cross-reference object. What I like about this is it'll tell me what all I have. So let me just kind of run through these really quickly. This is in Contoso. If you've watched my series on what's new in 2012, you've seen me create and delete some of this stuff. But let's kind of point out what we're looking at here, because this is a very important container. This has a link to the schema, which is different than the configuration partition of Active Directory. That's what we're looking at now. The schema is a different partition. If I right click on it and say new connection, then here I am looking at the schema. Here is the schema of Active Directory. This is what we hear about all the time. What is the schema? It's this majorly scary thing that just people run and hide when they hear about it and lock their doors and say, no, don't touch the schema. It's really just a class of, or a set of attributes and their classes and what it is that it means to be things inside of Active Directory. So if it can exist in AD, it's defined here. And you can see it's just a big flat file talking about a whole lot of different stuff that goes into the directory, like, well, there's department, for instance. And you can just kind of scroll through and look at all of these things. For everything like drink is an actual attribute that would theoretically be the favorite drink of a user. It's always been there. It's the drink, favorite drink attribute. It's got a description. So looking through here, there's all your little schema stuff. The entire forest shares a common schema and a common configuration partition. So that's important to understand. Of all of the partitions in the database, your entire forest, no matter what the domain is, all of them share a configuration partition and a schema partition, and those are listed right here. One enterprise configuration and enterprise schema per forest. Those are kind of important to understand regardless of. So obviously with Active Directory, we have to have a domain partition for every domain in the environment. In this case, because we have both a contoso.com and also a corp.contoso.com, we have a domain partition for each of these. I can connect to those, right-click, say new connection to the naming context, and now we're looking at the domain partition inside of ADSI edit. And what does that look like to you? We've got domain controllers, we got lost and found, we got the OUs for test 1 and test 2 and test OU, and the users container. What's that look like? Well, it should to you, hopefully, look like Active Directory users and computers. Why? Well, because that's essentially what that is. Active Directory users and computers is just an Ldap viewer, Ldap editor that attaches to this partition in Active Directory and lets you see things a little bit prettier. But pretty much anything you can do in there, you can do in here. I could come in here and start obliterating users if I wanted to. Now, you might get a little confused. You look at a user, like here's Carissa. You might think by looking at her, oh, well, what's the deal there? That's a folder. Well, that's because users are actually leaf objects. So they'll appear like that in the directory. But here's all of Carissa's attributes, right? So I don't have a whole lot set on this user account. Carissa, by the way, is my oldest daughter. But if I filter that and just say show only the attributes with values, now we got a little bit smaller set of attributes to look at. But these are the things that you would see if you were to look in Active Directory users and computers, and then you'd see like object SID and object WID and all that stuff as well. So sometimes you can see more stuff in ADSI edit, but I'm going to get away from myself if I keep that up. So partitions. We have the corp.contoso.com because obviously we do have a separate partition for every domain in the environment, and the same goes for domain tree. So if you were to have like a sales.fabricam.com, well, that's going to be in here as well, because if it's part of the same forest, even though it's a different domain tree, it would be listed here. Also, there's by default going to be one forest DNS zones partition and one domain DNS zones partition for each domain that you have. So one forest for the entire forest, one domain for each domain that you have. In this case, we have a 2-domain forest, and as such, we have 7 partitions in Active Directory. So think of partitions as tables in the database. So we got a schema, config partition, we got the corp and corp.contoso and the contoso domain partitions. We're going to have for each of those domain partitions an application partition and then the forest DNS zones for the entire forest. You might be wondering, what are those application partitions for? Well, that's where you should be storing your DNS. Your DNS should be in an application partition. It's a better place to store DNS data for several reasons, not the least of which the fact that if you have a DC out there that is not a DNS server, it won't get replicated these partitions because it doesn't need them, because, well, they aren't DNS servers, therefore they don't need those partitions, and those domain controllers would only get a domain partition for the domain that they're a part of, the schema, and the config partition. So some of your DCs would only have 3 partitions if they were part of a domain, but not actually a DNS server. So these are great little places to jump off from. So like my forest DNS zones, if I want to look in there and see that, I can expand out my forest DNS zones and look under Microsoft DNS, and well, hey, there we go. I've got contoso.com right here. That means that I'm storing contoso.com in the forest DNS zones partition. And what does this look like to you? Well, it should look like the DNS management console. This is, once again, the DNS management console is really just attaching to this portion of the database, right? So let's collapse these out. We're looking at the configuration, the schema, one of the domain partitions, one of the application partitions inside of Contoso. But what we created was an Active Directory lightweight directory services instance. So I'm going to connect to it. The way I'm going to do that is, since I installed it here locally, is I'm going to connect to localhost. And I'm going to go ahead and connect to its configuration partition. So what did we do here? All right, so I just took a non-domain controller, this local box that we just installed this LDS instance on, and I connected loopback to it, and I found a config partition. All right, so what's in the configuration partition? All right, let's expand it out and take a look. Does this look familiar? Well, it should. There's Contoso. This way it looks, and here is the differences. So you can kind of take a little look-see. It's very similar though, right? So creating an Active Directory instance versus creating a LDS instance, you get a lot of the same stuff. So a lot of the structure is going to be very familiar to you. One of them is having the partitions container. So if I look at partitions under the LDS instance we have, well, we told it to go ahead and create an application partition, and there it is. And once again, this is Active Directory. Even though it's LDS, we still have a shared schema and a shared configuration partition for any of the other servers, member servers maybe, that we go ahead and join to this LDS instance. Right now it's just this one server. This one server is the only one that's actually attaching to it and replicating it. Well, obviously there's no replication going on, but you get the idea. But anybody who gets joined into this is going to share a schema and a config partition. So let's look at that real quick. So let's look at the schema. I'm going to go ahead and new connection to the naming context. Once again, it does have its own schema. I'm going to close that right now to kind of give us some more room. And you should see this looks very familiar. This looks a lot like the stuff we were looking for before. When we were kind of going down there, we saw department. Well, department exists in this schema because we imported those LDIF files. The LDF files that we imported during the wizard put these here for us. It created this partition, or it didn't create the partition, sorry, it created the schema during the install, and then as part of the LDF import, it brought in a lot of these things that should look very familiar to us. So, you know, I can come down here and kind of look. You'll see a lot of things that you would find, like MS objects, the different pieces and parts that it takes to bring in stuff from a directory, or at least give us a method of looking at the database in a way that's familiar to us. So it's got a lot of the same attributes. It also has a configuration partition, so we've actually kind of already attached to that right there. And then it's got this application partition right here. So instead of having a domain partition, it has an application partition, and it supports non-standard Microsoft names. So you notice that I did this. I could have called this Microsoft.com if I wanted to. So let's connect to that. New connection to the naming context. Microsoft US, and there's really not much here, but there are things that are here are things you should be very familiar with. You know, a lost and found, for instance, right? So we would see that in the Contoso partition. There's a lost and found here as well, right? So lots of familiarity. Okay, so that's one thing you can do, is look at it inside of ADSI edit to kind of get an idea of what this thing is structured with. You can also look at it through sites and services, because we imported that piece. So let's get sites and services up. Alrighty. Did it populate in... I don't see it here. Ah, there it is. Alright, so if we open up sites and services, the default place it wants to go to, obviously, is going to be Active Directory sites and services. You can see we've got the contoso.com domain here. So instead, what I'm going to do is change to a different domain controller, and I'm going to type a directory server name, in this case localhost, and we're going to connect to that. So yes, connect to that. So you can see we've got a default first site name, just like you would in a brand new Active Directory environment, and we've got servers in it, and look at that, we've got our Contoso MS1 listed here. He's not a domain controller, but he's being listed here because he has NTDS settings and will be able to replicate with other instances, other servers that are running LDS instances and actually want to replicate this between them. So this should look very familiar to you. We've got subnets and our site transports. We've got the default first site name. We've got a server in there that's going to be replicating this this new LDS instance, just like Active Directory. So I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is definitely very familiar type stuff if you've been working with Active Directory for a while. But, you know, you obviously want to do something with this thing, and to do something with it, you probably need to get some data out of an existing directory into it. Unless what you're doing is just building a completely raw, generic, Ldap instance that you're going to do with, you know, some specific management, adding your own users in. Most people, though, I think are probably using this to bring things out of an existing directory and then sync them up. So that's where you might find an LDS instance sitting out in the perimeter of your network. So here's how you would get the stuff out of your existing network. And I haven't done this for a while, so I'm probably going to foul this up. The tool is LDI FDE. And used to be you would type -E for export. I think you still do on 08R2. This is 2012. I think we got rid of the E. I could be wrong about that. We've got to give it a file name, though. So let's call this export.ldf. And then we're going to need to point this at the DC with the -S. So we're going to point this over at Contoso DC1. And we're going to do this -M, and M, if I remember right, it just says if it's an attribute in Active Directory that is only used by AD LDS and not LDS, don't pull it out. I'm already logged on as a domain admin, so I shouldn't have to do the -A username password, so I should be able to just hit this, and it should connect to the DC, and it should pull everything out of the directory, and it looks like it got there. Alright, so we have 312 entries exported. That's cool. So then we got to get it pulled in. So LDI FDE again, and we're going to put it in import mode. That's -I. The default is export mode -E, which I think once again has been retired. So then we give it a file name, and we called it export exp tab to complete export.ldf, and I don't know if I need to do a -S locals LOCAL. I could probably leave that off, but I don't know for sure. And we'll do the -M again. So let's see. Okay, didn't like that. Let's see, what did it not like about that? Invalid parameter SAM logic can be turned on for import. What did it not like? Oh, it may not like the -M actually. So let me get rid of that. Okay, so what did it say? It says connecting as localhost, connecting as me, importing file, loading entries, an error on entry, starting on line, no such attribute. The server side error is x57. Alright, so even with the M, looks like we had no ability to get that M, because if you can tell, the hint here is no such attribute. It tried to import something out of that text file, the LDIF file, that did not exist in this directory. So I think I've skipped a step in here. I'm going to have to scratch my head for a second, and I'll pause it and try to remember what it is that I did. I think I need to pull attributes. I thought by importing in the install with all of the LDIF files that we selected, we had everything, but maybe I needed one more that I'm not thinking of. So let me pause for a second and see what I've done, then I'll come. Yeah, I think I totally brain farted there. It's probably because it's trying to import stuff that doesn't exist. Like I said, I haven't done this in a while, so you guys are probably laughing at me right now. Alrighty, what did we call this sucker? Microsoft US. So O equals Microsoft, C equals US. Let's see if that does it. So form. Oh, I probably should have exported from a start point instead of just pulling the entire directory, because we're probably trying to overwrite some stuff. So what do we do? And by the way, you would normally not edit the text file directly, because those can get really big. You can actually do that with a -C, and all you have to do is find and replace with a -C space, and then whatever string you have, space whatever string you want to replace it with. So I could have done what you saw with the Control-H there with the find and replace. That was not necessary. Let's see. So again, so the cool thing about these Let's tags is that they aren't scripted. You just kind of play through it like a Let's Play. And wait a minute. What if that ain't anything to do with it? Surely not. Let's kill that Bob. We have 2 Bobs, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. Okay. Let's get a little more specific about it. Let's start that all over. Let's do another. Let's export the OUs. To DC1. Let's see. I think it's -D. So we would want object category for the organizational units. Oops, UNIT. And then we're going to get the attributes for CN, object class. Works. Okay. No entries found. I didn't find anything in there. I don't think there is such a thing as an organizational unit. 4 entries. Okay, so let's test that. There they are. So let's get rid of the place it with because I want to have a different structure of this thing. Not 0. O equals Microsoft. And O equals US. I mean C equals US. If you're wondering why I did it that way, is I want to show that you can use a kind of a weird structure for your environment. Okay, so let's see if I can get those to import. So now we're going to do the, once again, LDIFD. We're going to import mode it. We're going to -F it to the export OU. And see if it goes. 0 interest. Okay, so no superior reference has been configured for the directory service. The directory service is therefore unable to issue referrals to objects outside this forest. Surely not. Okay, so I guess we need to tell it to do it here and not anywhere else. Alright, so if I come back over here and refresh this, now we've got our OUs and our CNs instead. Okay, so DC, so we're going to be able to get those. But I do actually have users in the user container up here. So looking back, let me collapse that. So under DC, we're trying to mirror this a little bit more. There is I do have some users in the users container, and we don't obviously have a users container here, so let's create a new object without importing it this time. We'll just create it as a container, and we'll give it the name of users, and see if it'll like that. So now we've got all the OUs, we've got a users container. Now we want to make sure we grab all the users, so we got to get a little more specific with our Ldap stuff here. So what we want to do is we want to LDIFDE again, and we're going to put this one to users.ldf, and we're going to point that at server contoso DC1, and we're going to pull that from DC equals contoso DC equals com, and we'll do this with a subtree, and man, I'm so not good at these. Okay, so we're gonna do object category equals person, so that's easy. We also need an object class for users. Oh wait, that's user, sorry. So best need to do this. Given name equals anything. And let's only grab CN, given name, object class, and obviously we'll need SAM account name. Let's see if that works. If that's a miracle if it gets anything, but oh, it did find 8 entries. So let's see. Users USER. Need to pick a more generic. I think I called it users.ldf, right? There we go. Okay, so we did get Kyle Bush, and for those of you who watch my stuff recently, Kyle Bush is always there. So I want to leave them in the containers that they're in, or OUs that they're in, and not modify any of that. But we obviously can't get them to import here, so we're going to Control-C, Control-H, Control-V, and then we're going to do the whole O equals Microsoft, and C equals US. Place all that. And let's do another import. This time we're going to do users. Zero entries. Okay, error and attribute conversion operation, data zeros. Errors occurred, no log files are written. What did I do wrong? LDIF import the users LDF to localhost, connecting, logging in, importing directory from file, loading entries, add error on entry starting at line 1, no such attribute. Wow, I thought if limiting the attributes down would really get us there. Well, let's look at what attributes we're actually trying to import here. So let's go and look at that again. So we're going to be adding top person, organizational person, object class user. given name, SAM account name. Let's look at the schema on this thing. So given dash name. That is interesting. Let's look at maybe it's really that easy. If that's what it's grumpy about, I can't even tell if that's what it's grumpy about, so. Alright, given dash name. Yeah, there's very little chance that that's what it's actually grumpy about, but we'll give it a shot. Let's try it one more time here. No, you to that. Log file, 0 entries. Error in attribute conversion operator does not. Yeah, parameters incorrect. No such attribute. Maybe we'll try it with just the M parameter again. So up arrow. Grab that. Get rid of the L. Put an M. Alrighty, and now we need to go in there and grab that thing. You can see that obviously gets quite a bit of extra stuff there. And C equals, yes. Let's import it. Alright, import mode, users.ldap, localhost. No such attributes. You know, surely it's not this. I remember LDIFDE being really sensitive on case sensitivity. Surely it wouldn't be that. But then, you know, every time I say, surely it could never be that, and then don't do it, and then I come back later and it turns out to be that thing, so we'll give it a shot. Maybe it just doesn't like the case that I had on that, so let's try that again. Yeah, that wasn't it. So we're still in no such attribute, and the parameter is incorrect. I wonder what attribute I could possibly be missing after having imported all of the really important AD stuff. Just for fun, since we created the users container, I wonder, let's just take one user that is in, okay, so Chris2 is in a different place. Control-Shift End. Alright, so test OU is a different place than that users container. I don't know that that has anything to do with it, but let's save this again. See if we can just get this one. Okay, so parameters incorrect. No such attribute. Same error with just one user. What's that? Why is there a... No, I guess they all have leading spaces. I guess one thing we could do is just clean this sucker up. Go as minimalistic as we can. So if we do a dn and add forget account expires and let's see, code page, country code, display name, we probably don't need. Say we're going to just import some basic attributes like that. Alright, 0 entries, parameters incorrect, no such attribute. Alright, so let's see if, yeah, we do have a user type and person, so CN. 4. Let's just be as simplistic as we can get here. Yeah. Let's just grab one. User 1 dodo. And we're going to go grab this one from this server. Which of course is O Microsoft. O equals Microsoft. US. So person category, given name anybody, and on that export we did an M. So rather than an L, we're going to do an M. So let's notepad user 1.ldf. Wait, I got nothing. No entries found. Okay, what was I looking for? So we were going to go from localhost Microsoft US subtree with any object category person, object class user, given name, anything. I don't really have a given name, but well, my idea there was let's just export and grab anything. So let's not be quite so specific and just grab the whole thing. So then we can go looking for that. This here, and let's put this other sucker over here, and so we've got, boy, those sure, if I'm missing it and everybody who's watching this video is laughing at me right now because I'm not seeing it there. CN, OU, testo, U. Of course, you know, we have both of these OUs exist, so name. So object. Sorry, slow. That's probably our problem right there. I was replacing it with what we were putting up here. So Microsoft US. So what we've got here is the actual GUID of this instance, this LDS instance. Let's keep looking. So top person, shown advanced view only. Some created. Cool. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this as a reference guide for changing this thing out here in just a little bit. And we'll do a refind and replace for this just a slightly different way. We're going to go back to the original command and we're going to go get a nice fresh LDIFDE user 1 local. Okay, we don't want that one. Users.ldf from Contoso DC, and we're going to grab all users with any name, and M gives us only attributes that we use. Let's see if we can go grab the notepad of users.ldf. So there's our 8. So we still need to change this one. So what I'm going to do is, what's the best way to do that? Because I need to change first probably the easiest way to do this is grab this, Control C, Control H, Control V, Control V, but what we're going to do actually instead is O equals Microsoft, and C equals US. Place all. Now what we're going to do is change the object category here, CN configuration, and we're going to replace it with what came out of the directory that we dumped it from, and then save this, and then import it. Import users localhost. You're kidding me. No such attribute. So, let me try this again, dumping only the with the L technique instead of the M technique, and grab. Wow, my history's gone. Where's the L? I don't have to type that all again. Ah, there we go. I knew it was in the history somewhere. So let's review the command ldifde users.ldf from Contoso DC1, getting anything from contoso.com, subtree search for category as person, class as user, given name as anything. We're only going to grab CN given name object class and CN account name. And then when we go out and pull the notepad for this, we probably need to close the existing notepad that we have that didn't work. And so the problem here is going to be that the object class that was fouled up last time didn't actually make it here this time, so that may not be the problem. We still could do a side-by-side peek at it and see which of these attributes don't exist over there. So what were we trying to pull in? So we're trying to do an add of, now this is coming out, I was looking at the Chris attribute. Alright, so this is just a user we created. So, object class top, object class person, object class organizational person, so it shouldn't be. Yeah, that could be it. Object class user. So we need to check in the schema and see if it can do those. But alright, so when we pulled this, we got CN. CN is there, given name, and SAM account name. So I think we can keep that because I think organizational person's there. Easy enough to check for. We just edit into as a schema for this instance. So, an organizational person does have the display name of organizational person, so we know that's okay. Should be, because we imported the daggum thing. Alright, so object class user, oh, we know that's there, but just so that we're doing our due diligence, object class, it's a class schema right there. So, CN equals user is for real. Might as well just do this. I was trying to avoid that, but let's just do this. Grab its schema and compare line by line. I need to view, turn off the action pane. How do I do that? I guess you don't. Oh, we can scrunch it. There we go. Scrunchy, scrunchy. Okay. So we're trying to import. We found top. Did we find top? Top. We found organizational parent. We found user. Pretty sure we checked for given name earlier. Given name. Yeah. And do we have SAM account name? I'm not seeing it here. Call me crazy, but I'm not seeing SAM account name. Look at MS to see if we pulled one of those in. Could it be that easy? Obliterate the SAM account name for these 8 objects. Or I guess the easier way to do that is pull this again and not grab SAM account name. Alright, so we don't have that. Didn't pull it over. 0 entries modified. A referral was, what did I try to do? Referral was, let me just read through this from porting from Ldap loading entries and referral. Why are we getting, oh, because we didn't modify it after we pulled it. Alright. Could I screw this up 6 ways from Sunday? And for those of you who might be watching this and saying, why is he doing a video where everything is going wrong? That's the entire idea of this series. For those of you who haven't seen one of my Let's Tech, this is the 3rd one, and I'm going to do a lot more of these, assuming that people actually like them and find them useful. The idea here is to not have a scripted type of setup. We're going to be doing these just like Let's Play and the gamer community does theirs. We're just going to pick apart a technology, we're going to try it, we're going to kick at it, let it kick at us, it's going to bite us, we're going to cry, but it's going to work eventually. And I won't post any videos where it doesn't, where it doesn't actually eventually work. And, okay, I'm going to break that train of thought for just a second here. Alright, so we need to import localhost. 8 entries modified successfully. This is a happy day. No scripted stuff. I don't want anything except how I normally learn technology, which I've found that a lot of people in this industry learn that way. They learn by pulling something out of the box, kicking at it, and cussing at it, and getting cussed at by it, and we learn as we go. If you just have a PowerPoint presentation and people, doing their thing and pausing it every time something goes wrong and then fixing it behind the scenes and not coming back, well, then you're not learning anything. So here we go. We've got our user Carissa made it in. We got Eddie, we got Kyle, we got Lisa. Looks like we didn't actually have anything in the test OU, but in the test 1, the Chris4 that we created is still there. So there we go. So everything actually got moved in. I probably could have done that just a little bit differently and saved it. Turned out that the SAM account name doesn't exist, and that kind of makes a little bit of sense, I guess, now that I think about it. So what we've done here in the last hour is we have created an Ldap directory, essentially. Pulled information from an existing Active Directory environment and moved it into this Ldap. So that was kind of tedious, but now that we know the format, we can repeat those commands and make them a little bit easier to port over. But there are other tools that you can use to synchronize this stuff up. One of them would be an identity management solution that does a constant synchronization from your Active Directory environment over into your LDS environment to constantly have synchronized set of user names that you could use to pull off a directory from some application that you don't want actually touching your AD environment. You can even sync the passwords, as a matter of fact. It's possible. Now, we obviously didn't do that, but there's ways to do that, and IFM is a great way to get started with that. There are other tools as well if you want to do a constant synchronization between AD and LDS, those are out there and available to you to keep you from having to export and import files all the time. There's a tool that there's a really good article on, and if I had time, we're already over an hour, and I don't think we should do this because some of it would be really redundant. But if you'll do a search for Atom Sync, that's a way you could actually synchronize at your leisure and your schedule things from Active Directory directly into your Atom environment. So let's see, what is that KB? I had it up earlier. I was going to mention it. Do a search for 732675. You'll see synchronize with ADDS. It's got kind of a two-step piece to it. Creating an instance, but then doing extending the LDS instance with all of the required Atom Sync attributes, and then actually setting up the sync. It's just modifying an XML file, giving it some values. In fact, I pulled that up earlier. There we go. This little Atom Sync config. Edit this thing, and then set it up on a schedule. Now, it doesn't get passwords, so that's why sometimes it's nice to have a identity management solution. So, anyway, with this, people might be saying, well, what in the world would you do this for? Well, it gives you something that you can actually query against with any Ldap compatible application. Active Directory is fully Ldap compliant. There's a lot of Ldap utilities and programs and stuff out there, so they would be able to do searches against it. We have a built-in Ldap query engine called LDP built into Windows. So, for instance, if I wanted to connect, I would just type in localhost and come in here and then bind, and then I can do searches against this directory. So for instance, I might come in here and search for make sure I don't have any weird controls turned on this thing. No, at the moment I don't. So let's say we wanted to do a search on the Microsoft US. Might do a object class as people and do a subtree, run that really quick, and I think I must have options. Display results is on. Okay, so people PERSON, object class is person. There we go. So just a quick little query against the objects here that we So, there you go. Anyway, guys, this has been Chris with Microsoft, and as always, thanks for watching. If you found anything about this useful or interesting, please give it a quick like. And feel free to subscribe to my channel. My blog is at 9z.com. It's real easy to remember. It's just the last number and the last letter, .com. It's got links to my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Twitter, and all the other stuff out there on the inner tubes. So anyway, and again, thanks a ton for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.